Chicago Tonight, Black Voices is made possible in part by Fifth Third Bank and by the support of these donors.
At Fifth Third, we believe when diverse voices are heard and empowered, communities are made stronger, lives are made better, and the future holds greater promise for all. That's why we're proud to support Chicago Tonight Black Voices. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can drive change.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight, Black Voices. I'm Brandis Friedman and thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, when city leaders and developers discuss new plans for major real estate projects, some groups are often left out of the discussion. What's being done to bring more Blacks and Latinos into the industry? One-on-one with Cook County's new public defender on his goals for the position and challenges he'll face. And Big Brothers Big Sister Chicago is looking for more mentors from the Black community. We'll hear from a local big and little about their experience.
But we also should let people know what the city is and what the city has been and what we can become.
And urban historian Sherman Dilla Thomas gives us the last word on how he says knowing the city's past can change the energy of its future. First off tonight, if you were to take a drive down Halsted Street from Lakeview and Lincoln Park to Inglewood and Roseland, it would be impossible to miss how the street goes from vibrant storefronts on the north to vacant lots on the south, a pattern rooted in decades of disinvestment and racism. Now, a group of Black business leaders is driving to change that. The Chicago Emerging Minority Developer Initiative seeks to boost development in Black and brown communities long ignored by big companies and encourage people of color to get in the game. Joining us are two members of that initiative. Graham Grady, partner at the law firm Taft, Stettinius and Hollister LLP. In interest of full disclosure, we should note that Mr. Grady is also a member of the WTTW Board of Trustees. And Leon Walker, managing partner of DL3 Realty. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Leon Walker, let's start with you, please. So in Chicago, the number of Black and Latino people combined well outnumber the number of white people in the city, which statistically then makes white people the minority. Why is there such a disparity in the real estate development world?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to talk about this. This is a topic that's long overdue. For the past 50 years, we've been focused mostly when it comes to the real estate investment and development industry. We've been primarily focused on construction activity and construction participation. And that's where you get the MBE participation goals, 26, 6, and 2, focusing on 26% being minority business enterprises that are Black. And, those are laudable goals. Those are great, objectives. Not often met, but they are still very aspirational, very good, and we need to see more equity in the construction space. However, what we are focused on, and as a developer who has applied this trade and been a practitioner in the South and West sides, is on getting more participation from entrepreneurs of high capacity and high potential from our neighborhoods to participate in the development process. And it's so important because the developer is what controls the entire budget, not just the hard costs, which are targeted for the construction part of the budget, but the soft costs and the land acquisition and all the professional services that are engaged in the process. So the developer is the pivotal key individual firm in the real estate development equation.
And Graham Grady, what would you say is keeping emerging developers from breaking through?
Brandis, again, thank you so much for addressing this important topic here in Chicago. Part of what's keeping the breakthrough from occurring, one has to do just with experience, as well as a personal financial statement. Secondly, would be a track record in terms of experience on increasingly large jobs. The third area that people frequently refer to in terms of subject matter expertise, we have people with great education, talent, and know-how, but until you have experience on different types of projects to grow and scale, it's difficult to get into the larger projects. And it really breaks down sort of into two areas. One is focusing on a neighborhood redevelopment, as you mentioned earlier in this call, But the other part also has to do with the downtown development, the redevelopment of Fulton Market, the big projects like the 78 and Lincoln Yards. We need to have access there as well, and to tap into the professional services which exist, and to develop people to continue to be able to provide services in those areas to grow this whole sector.
Graham, what might be the typical pathway to becoming a developer? What does that look like? It's not, there could be many ways to get there, basically.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, Brandis. It's really a mentor-mentee situation. It's not like going to law school to become a lawyer or med school to become a doctor. If you look at the background of any of the big developers, they all have a unique path. They've all been mentored by one or more persons. And as some have said, there's always a rich uncle in the background that either has a big capital or a lot of land. And so some of those are real challenges for people coming from minority communities, but that really is a big part of it. It's the mentorship, the one-on-one relationship, and the experience, which takes time and project after project to develop the expertise to grow to be a real developer.
And Leon Walker, what would you say is the business case for increasing diversity in commercial real estate development?
Well, you know, and just to add on to Graham's comments also, most of our developers of color are concentrated in areas which are challenged demographically and economically. And so even launching or scaling projects in, what are now the Invest Southwest areas, which I think is an awesome idea that the administration and city is pushing now, because we're putting focus and energy and using the assets of the city to propel developers of color into projects. But normally, without that intentionality, you have a situation where developers of color are mostly focused on projects that are in areas where banks are shying away from, where appraisals are not as strong, and where tenants are not as readily available. So you have a context in which we're trying to raise up developers of color, and I think Graham brings a great point. We just can't focus on the neighborhoods. We have to have a two-fisted approach that says, let's look at both the downtown and the major market opportunities, as well as the emerging market opportunities. And so now we are trying to coordinate and be a resource and referral for those developers of color that are rising up and wanting to tackle larger and larger commercial projects. And that's what Chicago Emerging Minority Developer Initiative is about.
Leon, how do you ensure that you are boosting diversity in the industry, and that is allowing for development in communities of color in those communities versus gentrification in those communities?
Yeah, well, again, those two separate issues. Development obviously by its very nature means change, but that change does not necessarily mean that there has to be gentrification. When I'm speaking to the communities in which we are engaged and involved in, we are transparent and we're honest about, things are changing, and changing meaning that there's going to be investment being made and there are going to be new entrants. But in most of the communities, particularly on the south and west sides of our city, we have a lot of land, but we don't have the population to support most of the aspirational development plans. And so, really it's not an issue of gentrification in Black communities and brown communities. It's really an issue of inclusion. And so in order to be inclusive and participate in what we call equitable development or venture development, you have to be intentional. And I can tell you more about that, but that's intentionality is what prevents gentrification and what ends up in what we call revitalization. It should be the key.
Absolutely. Graham Grady, what sort of things do big name developers, do they not know or misunderstand about disinvested communities?
It's interesting you mentioned that. So many of the big developers, I think their heart is in the right place, but they don't have the tools or experience to bring diversity, equity, and inclusion in on the professional services side. As Leon mentioned, on the construction side, there's been great progress. Hire 360, a lot of the companies direct hiring programs, but on the professional services side, there really just isn't the exposure. And that's part of what we're trying to do through this initiative, along with some of our other partners. We want to thank the Chicago Community Trust for financing this initiative, the Chicago Emerging Manager Developer Initiative, because the trust recognizes that in order to close the wealth gap, to close the racial wealth gap, that this important real estate development sector needs to be addressed. DEI is everywhere. Every board and committee I'm on, from the Chicago Symphony to the Commercial Club to the Economic Club to my own law firm, has a DEI initiative. But this also needs to reach the real estate development community. And it's not a place where there is traditionally much diversity in the corporate C-suite with developers.
And Graham, in just the couple of seconds that we've got left, what does the city need to be doing to support these emerging developers?
The city is pushing strong. The Invest Southwest program that Leon mentioned earlier is a great way to focus attention on some key areas. The city is rolling out numerous requests for proposals for redevelopment of sites in long disinvested neighborhoods, and that's fantastic. I think we could ask the city if they could do more to push developers on the downtown, Fulton Market, River North, and the mega projects, the HQ2 sites.
So a lot more
throughout
work.
The city.
Yeah, a lot more work to be done.
There.
And that's where we'll have
Yeah,
to leave it. Unfortunately,
Brandis.
we're out of time. My thanks to Graham Grady and Leon Walker for joining us.
Thank you, Brandis.
Up next, one-on-one with Cook County's new public defender, who we spoke with just before he started the job April 1st. Cook County has a new public defender. Coming into the position is Sharon Mitchell Jr., who had previously worked as an assistant Cook County public defender until he was selected as director of the Illinois Justice Project in 2016. He's coming in at a turbulent time. Jury trials are resuming with a massive case backlog. A controversial criminal justice bill was signed by the governor last month. All of this with the backdrop of COVID-19. Joining us now with more is Sharon Mitchell Jr., the new public defender for Cook County. Sharon Mitchell, congrats on the new position, and thanks for joining us. So as I just mentioned, Cook County courts resuming trials, and there's a massive case backlog. How do you plan on handling all of this coming into this position at such a turbulent time?
Well, I think we're going to have to handle it by really getting together with both our leadership and our rank and file and figuring out what the best solution is. This is going to take, quite frankly, a lot of thought. Those conversations are already starting. It's going to take a lot of logistics, but I think the key thing is to be making sure that I hear from the staff and I hear from leadership, and I protect the safety of our clients and protect the safety of our staff in making the correct decisions.
How did you come to find your calling as a public defender?
You know, I think it was early on. You know, I'm a lifelong Chicagoan. I'm a son of a librarian, a Chicago public librarian, a driver, a long-haul driver that finished his career at Streets and Sanitations. I was born at Michael Reese Hospital. I was raised for my first 6 years at South Shore, then spent the balance of my time my upbringing in West Pullman. You know, I grew up at a time where it was clear that the justice system wasn't all about, punishing the bad guys and protecting the good. You know, I never grew up with the thought that as soon as you see the blue lights that you'll be safe. I grew up knowing a system that far often gets it wrong, whether it's through incarcerating the wrong person or over punishing someone that may have made a mistake and treating people with disrespect and sometimes violence. So it was early on. I interned at the public defender's office as a law student. I knew that I was interested in justice, didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And very early on, when I ran into a former classmate who couldn't believe that I was on the other side of the bars in a suit and tie instead of a khaki jumpsuit, that conversation, his wonderment that somebody from where I came from was able to do this just as a law clerk, it kind of defined what I do for the rest of my career. And I'm so excited to be here talking with you today.
Once you get into the position, what are your goals for the office?
Well, again, I start on April 1st, and I think it's incredibly important that we really take advantage of the wisdom in the room, whether it comes to leadership or rank and file. With that said, no matter what the case is, we've got a dual role. We've got to provide zealous advocacy to all that we are assigned to, and we've got to be an engine for progressive system change. So I'm going to be talking to folks, having conversations. I certainly have ideas, but I'm not the person that walks into a room and says, hey, I've got all the good ideas and I know exactly what we need to do. I need to be respectful of the wisdom in the room. But the reality is the reality. And, we've got to prep for two gigantic changes. You reference those, the opening of the courts, the changes presented by the wonderful Safety Act. And I'm excited to really kind of think about, reevaluate how we do just the basics, how we collect data, how we train, how we advocate, and how we interact with the community that has demanded that the justice system, the legal system, give it better results.
You were very active and influential in the abolishing cash bail portion of the Safety Act that you just referenced, the criminal justice reform bill that the governor signed last month. Why was that an important issue for you?
Well, I think it's clear using money to make decisions about who should be in jail and who should not be in jail creates all types of really bad consequences for our communities, whether we're talking about the dollars that are pulled out of communities that can barely afford it, mainly paid by Black women, mothers, sisters, friends, and family, or it's the over-incarceration we see through a reliance on the use of cash bond, which has a big role when we're talking about problems further down the line, mass incarceration, wrongful convictions. I'm proud to be a part of that move. And quite frankly, it's something that folks have been working on for quite a long time because the current system just has failed to keep us safe. The current system has failed to produce just results.
And how do you view the relationship between the public defender and the Cook County State's Attorney?
Well, listen, it's an adversarial position in the courtroom. With that said, I think Attorney Fox has done an excellent job, an excellent job when it comes to policy decisions. When you're talking about the public defender and you're talking about the state's attorney, clearly given the roles, we won't always get along. But I am incredibly excited to work with somebody who has been a champion for progressive change. Attorney Fox has worked hard advocating for the end of money bonds. She's worked hard on legalizing cannabis. Again, there'll be times where we won't get, we will have some back and forth and because of the things that happen in the courtroom. But I respect Attorney Fox. I know that she is a champion for change. And, I'm just a fan.
And Sharon, I apologize, we've got about 30 seconds left, but COVID cases in the Cook County Jail had been relatively low as of late compared to the spikes that we saw last year. How do you plan on working with Sheriff Tom Dart to maintain that low infection rate?
Well, we'll talk with the Sheriff Dart soon, hopefully. I start on April the 1st. And I think the key, though, is that we don't need to have a whole bunch of people in the jail. That the way the jail is set up, the way any jail is set up, is when you have too many people in the jail, you're going to have problems. So we need to be thinking deeply about how people get into the jail, how people get out of the jail. And that's going to be one of my main concerns.
Work is cut out for you, Sharon Mitchell. Best of luck. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And we're back with more Chicago Tonight Black Voices right after this. The Big Brothers Big Sisters mentoring organization has been in Chicago for more than 50 years. Over those 5 decades, they say the need for adult volunteer mentors, what they call bigs, has only grown. They're especially looking for more bigs from the Black community to make cultural connections that help kids achieve their full potential. Producer Erica Gunderson has the story.
Omari Rashid and Jordan Bond are not related, but they are brothers.
Everything you play on the Xbox X.
Bond and Rashid were matched by Big Brothers Big Sisters Chicago when Rashid was in 5th grade.
From the jump, he was really great-mannered guy, confident, great personality, smart, and willing to work hard. So he was awesome from the beginning.
Through the years, Rashid and Bond have done all the big and little things brothers do together.
I remember one of our first outings. Was it the Museum of Science and Industry?
We did an 8K. It was either 10K or 8K.
The hardest run of my life. Sledding was probably one of my favorite outings too.
Definitely basketball. That's the easiest. We've played a lot of different places.
And Rashid recalls even the less adventurous times he spent with Bond fondly.
He took me to go see what it's like to be a homeowner. We went on the roof and we looked at some problems in the roof.
School has a lot of great material. There's a lot of practical stuff that's missing, personal finance being one of them.
Rashid's mother, Kamaria Ngozi, says Bond's presence has helped open up her son's world.
I just want to make sure that my son had all the tools that he needed to achieve his maximum potential. I wanted him to also learn about the value of volunteerism and to pay it forward, to show that people cared about him enough to invest in him and commit to helping him reach all of his goals. Jordan made it easy too, because it was like, man, it was just like he was this long lost family member.
Big Brothers Big Sisters Chicago CEO Jeremy Foster says his organization is on the lookout for more Black men and women like Jordan Bond to take on this big and rewarding role.
Good big brother is a good big brother. We understand how important it is to see somebody who looks like you in everyday life. Having success, maybe growing up in a similar environment that you grew up in.
8 years after being matched with Jordan Bond, Omari Rashid is not so little anymore. He just turned 18 and is preparing to head off to college in the fall.
I think that he's always had a inclination, towards HBCUs, which I think are dope. I think my only encouragement was just, to don't limit yourself.
Jordan was one of my recommenders, my recommendation letter. I applied to 7 colleges. I got into all 7. My top 3 is
just all 7. Just got into all 7.
I'm gonna contact them when I go to college, and I think it's gonna be the same.
Agreed. This guy's family. So, no matter the distance, no matter the time, family's family. And so he knows I have his back, throughout everything.
For Chicago Tonight, Black Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
And an update on that story, Omari Rashid says he's leaning toward Florida A&M for college. For those interested in being a big or little brother, or sister, we have more information on the program on our website. Chicago is famed for its patchwork of neighborhoods, each with a unique history. But over time, the rich history of some of the city's communities has become clouded by tragedy. Urban historian and Southsider Sharon Mitchell Jr. says that perception can cloud a community's future, too. Tonight, Thomas gives us the last word on how he says understanding our city's past can lead to a better tomorrow.
My name is Sharon Mitchell Jr., and I'm an urban historian here in Chicago. We're standing in front of Frank Gillespie Elementary School, a school here in Chicago that's named after the founder of the Supreme Liberty Life Insurance Company. And we're here today because I wanted to highlight not only the history of the school, but the history of the man. Frank Gillespie started what was the first African-American life insurance company founded north of the Mason-Dixon line. Why is that important? In the early 1900s, life insurance companies would not give African-Americans life insurance. We know that that's a way to create generational wealth. But not only did his company insure African-Americans, it also provided the seed money for what will become Burr Oak Cemetery, where Emmett Till lays in peace right now. From that money, he hired a young intern by the name of John H. Johnson, went on to give us Ebony and Jet. This school is nestled in a neighborhood called Lilydale. To my knowledge, it's the only neighborhood in Chicago that was entirely built by African Americans. That was unheard of in the 1940s and 50s, but it was true. African American bricklayers, electricians, plumbers, all built the neighborhood for themselves and now has a school here. We're down the street from Robert Abbott Park, but the park only says Abbott Park. I wonder how many people in Princeton Park and the surrounding neighborhoods know that that park is named for the founder of the Chicago Defender. If you're African American here in Chicago and your family arrived after World War I, it was probably because your family read an article by Robert Abbott. And so here in Chicago, we have a place we call Parkway Gardens. Notoriously, it's called O Block. That neighborhood sadly has a bit of an energy, but I wonder if the people there know the history of the neighborhood. That neighborhood, both sides of the street, was owned by an African American by the name of Herman Roberts. He had the Herman Roberts Road Show. It was a place where African American performers would come to stay. They could perform downtown at what we call tan clubs, but they couldn't sleep there at night. Herman Roberts provided them a place to stay And he would also provide an outlet for up-and-coming musicians. If you go to Ellis Island in New York, you feel an energy. If you go to Gore Island in Ghana in Africa, which they call the door of no return, you feel an energy. But you do that and you feel that energy because you're aware of the history before you arrive there. Every weekend we broadcast out how many people were shot and sadly how many people were killed. And I think that that's important information, but we also should let people know what the city is and what the city has been and what we can become. Chicago neighborhoods have a history, and I think if we started to give that information and tell the history of the neighborhoods, perhaps we can change them.
And Sherman Thomas will get to put his history expertise to the test on WTTW. He's a contestant on the Great Chicago Quiz Show with Jeffrey Bear this Friday, April 16th, so be sure to check him out. And be sure to visit our website to watch more in our Last Word series. And that's our show for this Sunday night. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And join Paris Schutz and me this week at 7 on Chicago Tonight. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Black Voices, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.